In the past decades, witchcraft has become a massive problem, taking thousands of lives, mostly in Africa, and especially in the DRC, South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, and Nigeria. In just the Gambia, a small country in Western Africa, over 1,000 people were convicted of witchcraft and forced to drink a hallucinogenic drug in order to confess. In Nigeria, over 15,000 children have been forced to flee or dumped in the streets due to witchcraft accusations. Many parents even commit infanticide, suspecting their babies to be possessed by the devil. In the DRC, over 25,000 homeless children are living in Kinshasa, over 60% just because of witchcraft accusations, and more than 50,000 children are kept in churches for an exorcism. In Ethiopia, the problem is just as atrocious for children. Birth out of wedlock, having twins, or even just a chipped tooth during childhood leads to babies being thrown into a jungle and abandoned, or even drowned. The origins of witchcraft originate from the Bible from around 900 BC to 721 BC. One of these stories involved King Saul, who confronted the witch of Endor to bring a prophet named Samuel back in order to defeat the Philistine army. However, the witch also prophesied Saul and his sons would all die, and the next day in battle, every one of Saul's sons died. Then Saul killed himself. Other verses condemn witches, and Exodus 22:18 actually says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Both of these biblical beliefs were used in the Salem witch trials. With many African immigrants coming to Europe, witches have also begun to rise there as well, such as in the UK, and it still happens in other places that you wouldn't normally expect. It's also important to note that witchcraft isn't just some voodoo only in Africa. The worst country in history for witch murders is the Holy Roman Empire, which took over 25,000 lives in just the late 16th and 17th centuries. In fact, from 500 and 1660, over 80,000 witches were put to death in Europe alone. In 2017, an effigy of Judith Butler was burned for witchcraft. In Saudi Arabia, witchcraft is still illegal. In fact, in just December of 2011, Abdulalim Nassar was beheaded for witchcraft. Witchcraft-related violence is not exclusive to Africa or to the Middle East. It's also left its marks in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, Nepal, and India have all witnessed over 1,000 lives lost since the early 2000s. Superstitious murders are still a global and still a modern-day problem. Although witch trials in Europe and the Americas is almost unheard of today, it's not gone in other countries. What do these witches even do to be pronounced as witches? Well, unlike in Western societies, where witchcraft is Satanism, African witches are considered to practice incest and other forms of perversion. In African society, witches are thought to act unknowingly, making it very easy to convict somebody of witchcraft, because based on their logic, they can't defend themselves. They usually act at night. Even in their normal self, they have no intentions of hurting anybody, but supposedly their witch side does. Witches are also known to cause sickness, death, tragedy, and even every single natural disaster. Bad crop harvest, your neighbor's a witch. Did you get sick? Probably a witch. This leads to many poor Africans also having to get a witch doctor to take steps against the supernatural and ensure that they're safe against witches. Witches are often thought as selfish and wanting more than they deserve, making it very easy for individuals to become targeted. The attribution of various misfortunes to witchcraft in African societies reveals a deep-seated belief system that often scapegoats individuals, particularly vulnerable groups like children or those born under specific circumstances. The lack of concrete evidence and the subjunctive nature of accusations make it easy for individuals to fall victim to these baseless claims, further perpetrating a cycle of violence and injustice. Witchcraft has grown mostly in Africa due to poverty and overpopulation. Additionally, support for vulnerable populations, such as the homeless children in the DRC, is incredibly important. These are still just children, and yet they're being ostracized from society for doing, frankly, nothing. All around, witchcraft is a violent practice that's deeply rooted in African history and culture. Although this is one of their beliefs, it's still important to neglect because this still causes harm and even death, mostly to children.